I'm Catherine, 35 years old, the daughter who never did anything right. That's how my father just described me to 50 people at his retirement party, in front of my husband, my brothers, my entire extended family, and half his former colleagues. The words hit like a slap, echoing through the country club's main dining room as everyone shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. My mother nodded approvingly from her seat, dabbing at her eyes as if she were so moved by his touching tribute. Truly touching, considering he had spent 5 minutes praising my brothers for their various achievements before delivering that little gem about me. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely humiliated by your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. My husband David, bless his heart, had been smiling politely through Dad's speech, until that moment. I watched his expression shift from pleasant interest to something much sharper. He set down his wine glass with deliberate precision, the kind of controlled movement that made me sit up straighter in my chair. "Excuse me, Robert," David said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room as he stood up. "Before we move on, I think there might be something you'd like to clarify for everyone here." Dad blinked, clearly not expecting any interruption to his carefully crafted narrative. "I'm sorry?" David's smile was absolutely lethal. "You just told everyone that Catherine never did anything right. I was wondering if you'd like to explain to your guests where exactly the money for this lovely retirement celebration came from." The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the air conditioning humming overhead. Dad's face went through several interesting color changes, settling on an alarming shade of gray. My mother's dabbing motion froze mid-pat. But here's the thing about my family. They had been underestimating me for so long. They had completely forgotten who actually made their comfortable retirement possible. And my dear husband was about to remind them. Let me back up a bit and explain how we got to this delicious moment of reckoning. Growing up as the only daughter in the Patterson family was like being the understudy in a play where you never got to perform. My older brother, Michael, was the golden child, star quarterback, full scholarship to Northwestern, now a successful pharmaceutical sales rep. My younger brother, Jake, was the baby, charming and funny, who could do no wrong despite barely maintaining a C average through high school. And then there was me, boring old Catherine, who got straight A's but was somehow never quite good enough. I graduated valedictorian from high school. Mom missed the ceremony because she had to drive Jake to baseball practice. I earned my MBA with honors from Chicago. Dad spent the entire graduation dinner talking about Michael's latest sales numbers. I started my own financial consulting firm at 28. The family response was lukewarm congratulations, followed by questions about when I plan to have children and settle down. You know what's funny about being consistently overlooked, and I use funny in the most sarcastic way possible? It gives you a lot of motivation to prove everyone wrong. While my brothers were coasting on family praise, I was building something real. My consulting firm specialized in investment strategies for small to medium-sized businesses, and I was good at it. Really good. Which brings us to Patterson & Sons Construction. Yes, that Patterson, my father's company, the family business that was supposedly going to support our legacy for generations. The company that was hemorrhaging money when I quietly stepped in 5 years ago to help with their financial planning. Dad never officially asked for my help, of course. That would have required admitting that his business acumen wasn't quite as sharp as he'd like to pretend. Instead, Mom casually mentioned on Sunday dinner that they were having some cash flow challenges, and maybe I could take a quick look at their books. Just family helping family, nothing formal. That quick look turned into a complete financial overhaul that saved their company and set them up for a comfortable retirement. But apparently that story wasn't quite as inspiring as my brother's various accomplishments. The quick look at Patterson & Sons books revealed a disaster that should have been featured in a business school case study titled, How to Run a Successful Company to the Ground in 10 Easy Steps. Dad had been treating the company bank account like his personal piggy bank for years. No investment strategy, no retirement planning, just pulling money out whenever he wanted a new truck or felt like taking mom on a cruise. The construction business was solid. Dad actually knew how to build things, and his crews respected him. But the financial management, let's just say there's a reason they don't teach construction management and advanced investing in the same program. When I dug into their records, I found money sitting in low-interest checking accounts. No diversification, no long-term planning. They were basically one major equipment breakdown away from bankruptcy. But here's where the story gets interesting. And trust me, you'll want to remember this part for later. Instead of just reorganizing their existing money, I convinced them to let me invest their profits. Every month, instead of letting Dad spend the surplus on whatever caught his fancy, we funneled it into carefully selected investment portfolios. Municipal bonds, blue chip stocks, some strategic real estate investments. Nothing flashy or risky, just steady, smart growth. The transformation was remarkable. Within 2 years, their investment portfolio was generating enough passive income to cover Dad's salary. By year 4, they could have retired comfortably, even if the construction business disappeared entirely. I turned a company that was living paycheck to paycheck into one with a 7-figure investment portfolio. And here's the kicker. Dad started taking credit for their sound financial planning at every family gathering. Apparently, he'd always been good with money, just needed to apply himself to investing. Mom loved to brag to her friends about Robert's business acumen and his impressive retirement fund. Have you ever had family members take credit for your work? Drop a comment below if this sounds familiar. I have a feeling I'm not alone in this experience. The brothers, meanwhile, were too busy with their own lives to pay much attention to the family business finances. They assumed Dad's newfound financial success was just the natural result of his construction expertise finally paying off. David knew the truth, of course. He listened to me stress about the monthly investment decisions, celebrated with me when our strategies paid off, and held me when I cried with frustration after family dinners where Dad pontificated about his financial wisdom while I sat silently picking at my dessert. "Why don't you just tell them?" David had asked after one particularly grueling Sunday dinner where Dad gave a 20-minute lecture about the importance of smart investing to Jake, who had never saved $1 in his life. "Because then they'll never see me as anything but their financial advisor. Right now, I'm just the daughter who never got anything right. If they know I'm responsible for their comfortable retirement, I become the daughter who's useful. I don't know which is worse." David understood, but I could see it bothered him. My husband came from a family that celebrated each other's successes, or accomplishments were shared and praised openly. The idea of hiding such a significant achievement was foreign to him. But I knew my family better than he did. If they knew I was managing their money, every family gathering would become a business consultation. Every conversation would include questions about market performance and investment advice. I'd become the family bank manager instead of their daughter. So I kept quiet and let Dad enjoy his retirement planning meetings, where he'd nod sagely at the financial statements I'd prepared and make pronouncements about market timing that were completely wrong but sounded authoritative. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my entire childhood trying to earn their respect, and now I was actively hiding the one accomplishment that might have finally impressed them. But at least I was building something real while they were living in their carefully constructed fantasy. My consulting firm was thriving, partly because the success I'd achieved with Patterson & Sons had become a fantastic case study for potential clients. Turns out, transforming a failing family business into a profitable enterprise with solid retirement funding was exactly the kind of track record that impressed other business owners. I just couldn't tell anyone which family business it was. Which brings us back to that retirement party and Dad's loving tribute to his disappointing daughter. The country club dining room was getting more uncomfortable by the second. Dad was standing at the podium, mouth opening and closing like a fish, while David remained standing, waiting for an answer. The 50 guests were all staring, probably wondering if they were about to witness a family meltdown at what was supposed to be a celebration. "I'm not sure what you're implying, David," Dad finally managed, attempting to regain control of the situation. "I'm not implying anything," David replied smoothly. "I'm asking a direct question. You just told everyone that Catherine never got anything right. I'd like to know where you think the money for your retirement came from." My mother jumped in, ever the diplomat. "David, perhaps this isn't the time or place." "Actually, Mom, I think this is exactly the time and place," I said, standing up beside my husband. My voice was steady, calm. Dad just gave everyone a detailed account of what he thinks of his children's accomplishments. I think David's question deserves an answer. You could feel the tension ratcheting up another notch. This wasn't how Patterson family gatherings usually went. We were supposed to smile, nod, keep things pleasant. We certainly weren't supposed to challenge Dad's version of reality in front of an audience. But something had shifted when he called me the daughter who never got anything right. Maybe it was the public humiliation, or maybe it was just 35 years of being underestimated finally catching up with me. Either way, I was done pretending everything was fine. "Robert," David continued, his tone conversational but with an edge that made me fall in love with him all over again. "When you hired Catherine 5 years ago to help with your business finances, what exactly did she accomplish?" "I never," Dad started, then stopped because technically he'd never officially hired me. That would have implied that I was qualified to help, that my expertise was valuable. Instead, I had volunteered my services for free because family is family and we help each other out. "You never what?" David pressed gently. "You never hired her. So she volunteered to completely restructure your investment portfolio and save your company's financial future out of the goodness of her heart?" The room was dead silent now. My brothers were staring at me like they'd never seen me before. Several of Dad's colleagues were looking between us with obvious fascination. And that's when I realized that David wasn't just defending me. He was about to destroy the entire narrative my family had built about their successful patriarch and his disappointing daughter. "Perhaps we should sit down and discuss this privately," Dad said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. He could see exactly where this was heading, and it wasn't anywhere good for his carefully crafted retirement celebration. "Why privately?" I asked, genuinely curious. "You just shared your opinion of my accomplishments with everyone here. I think it's only fair that they hear the complete story." David pulled out his phone. "Robert, should I show everyone the investment portfolio balance, the one Catherine built from essentially nothing? Or would you prefer to tell them yourself how her financial management turned your struggling construction business into a $1 million retirement fund?" The collective intake of breath from the audience was audible. My brothers looked like they'd been hit by a truck. Mom had gone completely pale, her hand pressed to her throat. Dad's face cycled through several emotions before settling on desperate damage control. "Catherine certainly contributed to our financial planning." "Contributed?" David's laugh was genuinely amused. "Robert, she designed every investment strategy, selected every stock, negotiated every bond purchase, and managed every aspect of your portfolio growth for the past 5 years. Your contribution was signing the papers she put in front of you." I should probably clarify something for those of you watching along at home. David isn't usually this confrontational. He's actually quite diplomatic. The kind of man who can disagree with you while making you feel heard and respected. But apparently, watching my father publicly humiliate me had triggered his protective instincts in a big way. "David," Mom tried again, "this is really not what, Janet? Not appropriate? Was it appropriate when Dad spent 5 minutes listing Michael's sales achievements and Jake's college graduation before announcing that I never got anything right? Was that the right time and place?" Michael finally found his voice. "Katie, we had no idea." "Of course you didn't, because you never asked. None of you ever wondered how Dad suddenly became this financial genius after 40 years of treating money like a renewable resource." Jake was staring at his hands, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this conversation had taken. I mean, we knew Dad had started investing more seriously. Dad doesn't know the difference between a municipal bond and a savings bond, I said flatly. 6 months ago, he asked me what a dividend was. But sure, he's been making all those sophisticated investment decisions himself. The beautiful thing about truth is that once you start speaking it, it becomes impossible to stop. All those years of staying quiet, of letting Dad take credit, of being the family disappointment while secretly funding their comfortable lifestyle, it was all coming out now. And honestly, it felt fantastic. Dad was making one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Catherine, there's no need to exaggerate your role. Exaggerate? David's voice carried a note of disbelief that made several guests lean forward in their seats. Robert, should I read them last March's portfolio report, the one Catherine prepared showing a 300% return on your initial investment? That's private financial information, Dad said quickly. You mean the private financial information that you've been bragging about to anyone who will listen? I asked. The impressive retirement fund you're so proud of, the one that's allowing you to have this lovely retirement party at the country club instead of wondering how you'll pay next month's bills. The audience was riveted now. This was better than any dinner theater they could have attended. A real-life family drama unfolding right before their eyes, complete with financial revelations and long-buried resentments. Catherine, Mom said, voice strained, please think about what you're doing. What I'm doing, Mom, is telling the truth for once. You know, that thing we're supposed to value in this family? I turned to address the room directly. For those of you wondering, yes, I am the family disappointment who never got anything right. I'm also the person who took my parents' construction business from near bankruptcy to financial stability, created an investment portfolio that's generated over $2 million in growth, and designed the retirement strategy that's paying for this entire celebration. The number hit the room like a physical force. $2 million.
That's not pocket change. Even in this crowd of successful business owners and professionals, Michael's jaw was literally hanging open. $2 million? $2.3 million, actually, as of last week's market close, I confirmed. But who's counting? What do you think will happen next? Drop your prediction in the comments. I have a feeling some of you might be surprised by how this plays out. Dad looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. The man who had just finished telling everyone about his disappointing daughter was now facing the reality that his disappointing daughter was the reason he could afford to retire at all. But the real shock was yet to come. Robert, David said, his tone shifting to something almost gentle. I think there's something else your guests should know. I looked at my husband sharply. We hadn't discussed this part. David was going off script, and I wasn't sure where he was heading. Catherine didn't just save your business, David continued. She turned down multiple opportunities to work for larger firms because she was committed to helping family first. She's been offered positions at 2 major investment companies in Chicago, both with starting salaries that would have doubled her income. That was news to everyone, including my brothers. I'd never mentioned those job offers to the family, partly because I knew they wouldn't understand why I'd turned down more money, and partly because I hadn't wanted them to feel guilty about how much time I was spending on their business instead of building my own career. She also, David said, personally guaranteed the loan when you needed new equipment last year. Her credit, her collateral, her financial reputation on the line to keep Patterson & Sons operational. Dad's face went ashen. That loan had kept them afloat during a particularly challenging period when 2 major projects had been delayed. Without it, they would have had to lay off half their crew and possibly declare bankruptcy. The bank required a personal guarantee, I explained to the increasingly fascinated audience. Dad's credit wasn't sufficient for the loan amount they needed, so I used my house and my business as collateral to secure their financing. Jesus, Katie, Michael breathed. We never knew. You never asked. None of you ever asked about the details. You were just happy that the money problems went away and Dad could keep running the business like nothing had changed. The truth was, I'd been managing their financial crisis for years while they remained blissfully unaware of how close they'd come to losing everything. Every month, I reviewed their cash flow, adjusted their investments, and made sure they stayed solvent. It was like being a financial guardian for people who thought they were completely independent. So, let me get this straight, Jake said slowly, clearly trying to process everything. You've been what? Running their finances for 5 years for free? Not for free, for family. There's supposed to be a difference. The distinction landed exactly as I hoped it would. This wasn't about money. It was about recognition, respect, and the fundamental assumption that family members support each other without keeping score. Except apparently we did keep score, just selectively. I think, Dad said carefully, we might have gotten off on the wrong foot here. The wrong foot? I laughed, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Dad, you just told 50 people that I never got anything right? That's not getting off on the wrong foot. That's throwing your daughter under the bus at your retirement party. I didn't mean... What did you mean? David asked. Because from where I was sitting, it sounded like you were dismissing 5 years of Catherine's expertise, dedication, and financial sacrifice for your family's benefit. The thing about my husband is that he's extraordinarily good at asking questions that cut straight to the heart of the matter. It's what makes him such an effective attorney and such a formidable opponent when he's defending someone he loves. Robert, said a voice from the audience. I turned to see Jim Morrison, one of Dad's longtime friends and business associates. Are you telling us that Catherine is responsible for your investment success? Dad was trapped. He could either admit the truth or continue lying in front of people who knew him well enough to spot deception. Catherine has been instrumental in our financial planning, he finally admitted. Instrumental, I repeated. That's an interesting way to put it, like saying Mozart was instrumental in composing his symphonies. A few people in the audience chuckled, despite the tension. I was apparently inheriting Dad's gift for dramatic timing, just using it for a slightly different purpose. Perhaps, Mom suggested desperately, we could discuss this at home. Why? So you can spend the next week rewriting history and convincing yourselves that Dad's contributions were more significant than they actually were? So you can find ways to minimize what I've accomplished and preserve your comfortable narrative about the disappointing daughter?
The room went dead silent. I knew I had crossed a line. Not just defending myself, but tearing down the entire mythology my family had built about who I was and who they were. And every single person in that room felt the shift. Catherine, Michael finally said quietly, we're sorry. We had no idea. I looked at him, then at Jake, then at my parents. No, you had no idea because you never wanted to know. It was easier to pretend Dad magically became a financial genius than ask who was actually behind his sudden success. That hit harder than anything I'd said before. I saw it in their faces, the realization that their ignorance wasn't accidental, it was convenient. But I wasn't done. There's something else, I said, reaching into my purse. David looked at me sharply. This part wasn't discussed. I pulled out a folder. 6 months ago, Peterson Capital offered me a position as a senior investment advisor. Starting salary, $200,000, plus bonuses, plus profit sharing. Gasps rippled across the room. I handed the offer letter to Michael, who stared at it like it was radioactive before passing it to Jake. 2 months ago, I continued, pulling out another paper. Harrison Financial Group offered me a partnership track position, $50,000 initial investment, projected earnings,
high six figures within 3 years. Another wave of shock. And last month, David's law firm offered me a position as their in-house financial consultant, salary equivalent to a senior partner. Even David looked at me in surprise. Katie, you never told me about that. I turned it down without thinking because I believed helping family mattered more. My voice cracked, just a little. I spent 5 years choosing loyalty over opportunity. 5 years sacrificing my own career to build your retirement. The silence was suffocating. But apparently, family loyalty is a one-way street. I build your wealth, risk my credit, work without compensation while being called the daughter who never got anything right. Dad's hands trembled against the podium. Catherine, I had no idea. That's the problem. You didn't want to. I stood straighter, my voice steady. But that ends tonight. Every head lifted. David, I said, turning to my husband, remember that conversation about me joining your firm? He nodded, confused but supportive. I'd like to revisit it. It's time I started working with people who value my expertise instead of taking it for granted. The ripple of shock through the room was almost physical. If I stop managing Patterson & Sons finances, what do you think happens next? Jake went pale. What about Dad's retirement? Oh, it's safe. I built it to survive without me. But future growth? Risk adjustments? Tax strategy? Market shifts? I shrugged. That requires ongoing expertise, the kind of expertise that, according to tonight's speech, I don't have. Dad looked desperate. Catherine, please, let's talk privately. Why? So you can convince me to keep sacrificing while you keep taking credit? No, not tonight. David stepped closer, protective. Katie, what are you saying? I'm saying Harrison Financial Group's offer is still open, and I'm done hiding my abilities so other people can feel comfortable. Then I turned to the room, 50 people frozen mid-breath. Effective Monday, I announced, I resign as your unofficial financial advisor. I'll prepare a full transition report. Hire a professional. Dad looked shattered. Catherine, you can't be serious. Oh, I'm completely serious. I picked up my purse. David stood with me instantly, taking my hand. And Robert, I added, looking directly at my father, the next time you give a speech about your children's accomplishments, make sure you actually know what they are. I smiled, calm, controlled, finished. Thank you all for a lovely evening. Then David and I walked out together, leaving a room full of stunned silence behind us.
I hope you've enjoyed learning about the Patterson family dynamics as much as we've enjoyed sharing them with you. That was the last thing I said before walking out of my father's retirement party and straight into the best career decision of my life. The next 24 hours were educational. Harrison Financial Group emailed before sunrise, not only renewing their partnership track offer, but increasing the compensation package. Word travels fast in financial circles, and apparently, a woman who could turn a shaky construction company into a multi-million-dollar portfolio was exactly the kind of shark they wanted on their team. My family's reaction? Predictable. Dad called 17 times before I finally answered. Mom showed up at my office crying about unity and forgiveness. Michael and Jake tag-teamed me with messages about responsibility and loyalty. Funny how they discovered those words only after realizing what they were losing.
But the most surprising call came from David's law firm. The legal community had heard all about the retirement party incident fast. Suddenly, the consulting role they had casually mentioned months ago was now a serious growth opportunity with long-term potential. Meanwhile, Patterson & Sons hired a financial advisor within 2 weeks. A perfectly competent one who charges them $4,000 a month for services I had been providing for free. Their investment returns dropped 40% in the first quarter after I left. Nothing catastrophic, just the natural result of losing someone who knew their finances better than they knew their own birthdays. My career at Harrison, on the other hand, exploded. Client after client came in through referrals. Within 18 months, I earned enough revenue to qualify for equity partnership. Then Peterson Capital came knocking again, this time with a senior partnership offer so generous, it made everything I'd earned before look like pocket money. They had been watching my performance and wanted to discuss bringing my client base into their firm. Meanwhile, David's health scare last spring triggered another round of family meetings. Everyone talked about forgiveness and how family bonds mattered more than money. I listened politely. Then I told them the truth. My issue was never money. It was respect, recognition, the basic human decency of acknowledging someone's work before dismissing their worth. Today, we still have a relationship. Different, but functional. More boundaries, more honesty, more awareness of what happens when I'm not the silent engine running in the background. David still says that night at the retirement party was his proudest moment as my husband. He tells me, "I've never seen anything more beautiful than watching you finally stand up for yourself after years of being underestimated." And he's right. Sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is refusing to accept less than you deserve, even from family, especially from family. If this story spoke to you, hit like, subscribe, and remember, your worth is not determined by other people's ability to recognize it. Sometimes you have to recognize it first. These days, I manage investment portfolios for clients who value my expertise, work with colleagues who celebrate my success, and come home to a husband who has never once taken credit for my accomplishments. It's amazing what life looks like when you stop accepting crumbs and start demanding the whole feast. And Patterson & Sons, they're doing fine. Different, but fine. They learned the value of financial expertise by finally paying market rates for it. And I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is stop letting them take you for granted. Best retirement party ever.